Solanus was not a household name in our family. I didn't know him. And really our introduction to Solanus was through my father, who was newly, how would you put it? I was going to say professor, but he wasn't a professor. He was a newly graduated doctor. And in Detroit at that time they had an epidemic. And he, as a doctor, an intern, was one of the doctors that put autopsies. And in doing so he got an infection. And the infection, as we understand it, and then we have to tell people I'm 85, so, but as we understand it, and it came to a time when he went to the hospital, he got an infection. He went to the hospital and the doctors told him that he might have to cut off his arm. And so his mother, and I think she was also, the other person was his sister, the mother's sister, came to Solanus and asked for prayers. And Solanus prayed for them and said that don't worry, they won't operate on the arm. And that was true. So that was, Solanus was instrument in that thing. But Solanus was not that known in the family. He was not a household name. So I was reacquainted with Solanus when I became a Capuchin. And I met Solanus in the seminary. And in those days, our community is very much divided, segregated, you might say. The young seminarians did not mix with the older friars. Like we had 3 recreation rooms. We could not use, the friars could not go to the father's recreation room or solemn fest. The brothers went to a special recreation room. So that was kind of a segregated community. That's the way we lived. We were not into fraternity. And so I really didn't know Solanus. I would see him walking down the hallways. I knew he had a reputation of a very prayerful man, and we experienced that in watching him. And I know a lot of visitors came to Huntington, this was at Huntington, to see Solanus. So he was kind of a member of the community, but distant. And so we really didn't know him. I didn't know him, except he's a member of the community, and that's the way that's all gone with renewal and things like that. We're very much regimented. And that's all gone now, obviously, good, thank God. But so that was my experience with Solanus at Huntington, and that was novitiate. And I'm trying to think here. Then when I left the seminary, became ordained, I was with Solanus here in Detroit. The part of our novitiate was in Detroit. And but again, Solanus was a distant person. He wasn't, he didn't mingle with us. So that's really all I know of Solanus. And to finish my dad's story, my dad obviously didn't have the amputation. And so they all reattributed to Solanus' prayer. But we didn't get into, oh, there's a miracle or any of that. We didn't do that. The family didn't do it. It was just the prayers were answered. But Solanus was not considered in those days, at least with our family, a saint. He was just a holy man who prayed, and that's one of the things I remember of Solanus. I used to come, here and walk through here, and Solano's would be praying. And you could see that he was wrapped up in prayer. And I would say to myself, I wonder what he's praying about, or how he got to that case, whatever. And so he really wasn't, didn't impress me. But you know, he was a community man, but kind of distant. But he mingled with us when you know. But he was an older friar, and we were younger, you know. And so there was, he was not what you might call a buddy. He was just a member of the community, a very holy man. And I said to myself, I wish I could pray like he does. But basically that's, my dad also, when Malcolm joined the order, Malcolm my brother, and I joined the order, my dad also became, quote, his doctor. But it was temporary. It was just someone to take care of him. And it was all, there was no big deal or big thing like that. It was just a member of the community. And my dad was his, I don't know, in those days, being a doctor was different than today. He was a family doctor, he was a general practitioner, is what they called them, and so they weren't, well, it was just different. In those days, the hospitals worked for the doctors. Today, the doctors work for the hospitals. Again, like everybody else, and in those days in renewal, and when they broke down the wall, you might say, quote, quote, between the priests and the fathers and the brothers, and in those days, the early days before the renewal, each one had their own rec room. The priests had a rec room, the brothers had a rec room, the clerics had a rec room. That's all gone. But in those days it was very, and they were sometimes very strict. But, so that kind of isolated, you know, Solanus in a certain sense. I know we had a lot of phone calls, you know, we didn't have, like we do today, a phone in every room. There was just 2 or 3 phones, and he had to use the community phone. And everybody had their signal, you know, like for Superior was 1 ring, and all this stuff, you know. So, but he was not different. He was just the same. There was no sense that, there was no question, there was no curiosity on our part that he's going to be canonized or anything like that. We didn't talk about, at least they did not enter into my mind. But we had the favors, but they were not considered. And we're kind of, you know, they were not considered miracles, at least not in my mind. You know, was favors. Anybody could get a favor.